You are listening to Steel and Fire, where history and military technology merge into epic stories. Today, Hector and Chronos will take you back to one of the most decisive battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Zama. The storm before the clash. The year is 202 BC. On the dry plains of Zama, under the blazing North African sun, waves of dust rise as if trying to swallow the sky itself. Tens of thousands of soldiers stand facing one another. But this is not just a battle, it is the final chapter of the Second Punic War, a conflict that has shaken the Mediterranean for nearly 2 decades. And at the center of this storm stand two men. Hannibal Barca, the child of oaths and war. Hannibal was not merely a general. He was a legend forged in fire. Born into the powerful military family of the Barcas, he was made to swear, as a child, before the gods that he would never be a friend to Rome. That oath shaped his entire life. He grew up in the campaigns of Iberia, learning to ride before he could write, learning strategy before he learned politics. By his early 20s, he commanded Carthaginian forces in Spain. And then he did the unthinkable. He led 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants across the Alps to strike Rome at its heart. Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae. 3 names that haunted Rome for years. At Cannae, Hannibal annihilated an entire Roman army, one of the worst defeats in Western military history. But victory could not last forever. Carthage weakened. Reinforcements never came. Hannibal remained in Italy for 15 long years, fighting without the resources to finish the war. And then, Carthage called him home. His homeland was in danger. Scipio Africanus, the Roman who learned from defeat. Facing Hannibal was a younger man, but no less formidable, Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Africanus. Born into the noble Cornelii family, Scipio lost both his father and uncle in the war against Hannibal. He survived Cannae at just 17, one of the few who escaped that massacre. But instead of fearing Hannibal, Scipio studied him. He learned Carthaginian tactics, the use of cavalry, elephants, flexible formations, and then used those lessons to reshape Roman strategy. In Spain, Scipio defeated Carthaginian forces and captured the entire Iberian Peninsula. In 204 BC, he made a bold move. He brought the war to North Africa. With 40 warships and 400 transport vessels, Scipio sailed from Sicily to Africa, bringing 29,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. His goal was clear: force Carthage to recall Hannibal and end the war on African soil. There was another force that would shape the outcome: Numidia. Numidia possessed the fastest light cavalry in the Mediterranean. Once loyal to Carthage, the kingdom fractured. Prince Massinissa, once Hannibal's ally, defected to Rome. He brought 2,000 elite Numidian horsemen, warriors who would become the blade that stabbed Carthage in the back at Zama. Before the battle began, Hannibal requested a meeting with Scipio. After nearly 20 years of indirect conflict, the two greatest generals of their age finally stood face to face on the dusty plains of North Africa. Hannibal sought peace. Scipio demanded unconditional surrender. Their brief meeting ended in heavy silence. No agreement. No compromise. When the sun rose the next morning, the fate of two civilizations would be decided by sword and shield. As dawn broke, the armies formed their lines. From afar, the battlefield looked like a vast canvas, each formation a stroke of destiny. Hannibal arranged his forces with cold precision. Front line, mercenaries from Iberia, Gaul, and Liguria, fierce, unpredictable, hardened by countless battles. Second line, Carthaginian recruits, inexperienced but numerous, driven by fear and desperation. Third line, his elite veterans, the survivors of Trebia, Trasimene, and Cannae. These were not just soldiers, they were Hannibal's brothers in arms. In front of them all stood 80 war elephants, armored giants whose steps made the earth tremble. On the flanks, Hannibal placed 4,000 Carthaginian cavalry, hoping to recreate the encirclement that had won him Cannae. But Scipio was not the Rome of old. He had learned from Hannibal. He deployed his legions in the traditional 3 lines, but with a revolutionary twist. Long corridors opened between the units, invisible channels designed to neutralize the elephants. On the flanks, he placed Roman and Numidian cavalry under Laelius and Massinissa, the fastest, deadliest riders on the field. Between the 2 armies hung a silence so heavy it felt like the world was holding its breath. The morning at Zama began with an eerie stillness. Then, the Roman trumpet sounded. A deep, resonant blast rolled across the plains, awakening every fear, every memory, every oath sworn by the soldiers. The ground began to shake. Hannibal's elephants charged. Dust exploded beneath their feet. Their roars mixed with the shouts of Carthaginian infantry. The horizon darkened under their massive silhouettes. But Scipio was ready. He gave the order. The corridors opened. The elephants surged forward and plunged into empty space. Confused, panicked, they veered off course. Some were wounded by Roman javelins. Others turned back, trampling Carthaginian lines. Hannibal's opening gambit had failed, and Scipio struck back. Numidian and Roman cavalry charged, sweeping the Carthaginian horsemen off the field. The battlefield was now left to the infantry, the heart of the storm. The clash of infantry, steel against steel. The 2 armies collided like crashing waves. Shields slammed. Spears shattered. Screams and steel filled the air. Hannibal's mercenaries fought with wild ferocity, Iberian falcatas slicing through shields, Gaulish warriors roaring like beasts. But the Roman lines held firm. When the first Roman line tired, Scipio pulled them aside and sent in his veterans, disciplined, relentless, advancing step by step behind their great scutum shields. The mercenaries broke. The Carthaginian recruits panicked. Chaos spread. But Hannibal still had one card left. His veterans, the iron core of his army, stepped forward in silence. No shouting. No bravado. Only the calm of men who had seen death too many times to fear it. They clashed with the Roman veterans in a brutal, grinding melee. No tactics. No formations. Only strength, skill, and the will to survive. For a moment, the outcome hung in the balance. Then, a distant rumble. Hoofbeats. Growing louder. And louder. Until the earth itself seemed to tremble. The Carthaginians turned, and saw their doom. Massinissa and Laelius had returned. Numidian riders swept in like a sandstorm, Roman cavalry like a spear of iron. They crashed into the rear of Hannibal's veterans with devastating force. Carthage was trapped. Romans in front, Numidians behind. No escape. No formation. No hope. In minutes, the Carthaginian army collapsed. The plains of Zama turned red. The battle was over. From his command post, Hannibal watched his army crumble. He saw the men who had followed him for 20 years fall one by one. He saw his own tactics used against him. He knew the truth: the battle was lost. Not because he lacked genius, but because Carthage was exhausted, Rome had evolved, and his era had come to an end. He ordered a retreat, not to save himself, but to save what remained of Carthage. On the other side of the field, Scipio stood silent amid the cheers of his legions. He did not smile. He did not raise his sword. He simply watched the dust where Hannibal had disappeared. He knew he had not defeated an army. He had defeated a legend. Carthage surrendered. Rome became master of the Mediterranean. Scipio earned the name Africanus. But the cost was immense. After Zama, Hannibal returned to Carthage and urged peace. But Rome demanded his surrender. He fled into exile, Syria, Armenia, Bithynia, always hunted, always betrayed. In 183 BC, surrounded by Roman agents in Libissa, modern Turkey, Hannibal drank the poison he had long carried. His final words were said to be, "Let us free the Romans from their fear of an old man. A lonely death. Far from home. No soldiers. No triumph. only a genius destroyed by his own greatness. Scipio's fate was no kinder. Though he saved Rome, political rivals accused him of corruption. Disgusted, he left Rome and lived in seclusion at Liternum. There, in 183 BC, the same year Hannibal died, Scipio Africanus passed away in solitude. On his tomb, tradition says he ordered this inscription: "Ungrateful Rome, let me rest in peace. Two enemies. Two geniuses. Two tragedies." And both died in the same year, as if history itself wished to close their story with a single stroke. Zama, the end of an age. Zama was not just a Roman victory or a Carthaginian defeat. It marked the end of the age of individual military genius and the rise of the Roman war machine. Hannibal, who brought war to Rome's doorstep, died far from his homeland. Scipio, who saved Rome, died far from the city he defended. Two men. Two destinies. Two flames that burned brighter than any of their time. And history, though cruel, remembers them as two of the greatest commanders ever to walk the earth.